This GTX 580 is going to be doing all of my graphics processing regardless, and then I'm going to run two different scenarios. I'm going to run with the 8600 GTS as my dedicated PhysX card, and then I'm going to try running with another GTX 580, which is obviously ludicrously overkill, as my dedicated PhysX card.
This demo is actually quite interesting in terms of its technical makeup, in that it's using an RTX 5090 to run the past-face version of Resident Evil, but there's a second 5090 that's actually doing the DLSS 5 pass there.
Yep, none of this is new. Nvidia's been trying to pull this kind of crap for decades. And there's a reason that Jensen Huang says that you, all of you gamers that are complaining, are wrong about DLSS 5. But it isn't that he actually thinks that you're wrong. It's that he doesn't really care, and he wants to convince you that you're wrong, because DLSS 5 is his Trojan horse to do what PhysX failed to do a decade ago: make it literally impossible for AMD to compete in PC gaming and graphics. You see, about 18 years ago, geez, I'm getting old, Nvidia bought PhysX developer Aegea and promised to bring in a new age of physics tech with their graphics cards. In reality, though, after just a few years of it, PhysX tech immediately flatlined in quality, stopped really innovating, and eventually it was really almost exclusively used as a cudgel to try and make Radeon users have a worse experience in mini games on PC, almost like trying to make them feel like there were Nvidia exclusives and that you were missing out if you didn't have an Nvidia graphics card. Although, honestly, oftentimes the special effects from PhysX looked worse than PS3 games, with debris from gunshots, for example, at least in my opinion, often just looking like flat JPEGs of popcorn popping out of walls. And many people, if you look it up online, did about a decade ago start complaining about how horrible PhysX looked. And eventually, vastly superior physics engines leapfrogged PhysX so much, and of course didn't have the exclusivity issue with Nvidia hardware, that almost no game dev kept using PhysX into the late 2010s, to the point that Nvidia eventually just open sourced PhysX and abandoned it. Actually, they tried to pull support for it recently, if you'll remember, but gamer backlash made them renege on that plan. And hopefully something similar will happen with DLSS 5, because, well, PhysX failed, but the idea of having some sort of flashy tech that AMD doesn't have, and then using that to strong-arm devs into using it, and thus locking AMD out of some form of essentially modern graphics, is a form of creating a PC monopoly that Jensen Huang has been trying to do for a very long time, and that hasn't changed. The new version of this attempt is DLSS 5, which, let's be clear, DLSS 5, at least in how Nvidia recently showed it off, is not DLSS. This wrinkle multiplying yet sometimes yassifying real-time enshittification tech is simply not upscaling. And don't buy Nvidia's lies. Devs are openly stating that this thing at least is de facto messing with the geometry of games and pulling control away from them for art direction, and replacing it with whatever Nvidia's AI thinks all games should look like. And devs that aren't being bribed, by the way, they do absolutely hate it. In fact, if you want an in-depth opinion of DLSS 5 from a game developer, I just put out a video that includes a 15-minute interview, so check that out. But you don't need to go there. There are tons of devs out there voicing their outrage over this. And ultimately, if you look around online, it's very clear. Gamers hate it, devs hate it, and it looks like anyone that can notice things like, entire shadows being removed from a scene. It looks like crap. So why is Jensen doubling down? Well, actually, I'm going to answer that question with two additional questions. Question number one: why would Nvidia call something that is clearly not DLSS, DLSS? Why not call it something like RTX Remix 2? I mean, honestly, I think if they showed off remasters of Half-Life 2, where, yes, maybe Alex looks a little yassified, but the game Half-Life 2 is so old that people don't even really complain, I'm sure people would have taken the presentation that they called DLSS 5, they would have called it RTX Remix 2 and showed old games looking like modern AAA. That would have gone off way better with gamers and developers. Okay, so that's question one. Question two: Why is this thing being run in real time? Why is Nvidia choosing to have a system where you need to use two 5090s, one for running the base game and then one for running a so-called DLSS 5 on top of it, kind of like what they did with dedicated PhysX cards decades ago? I mean, really, think about this. It would make way more sense to have an RTX Remix 2 that's actually not something you run in real time, but is some sort of package, something to entice developers to let Nvidia sponsor your titles so you'll have all this Nvidia tech in it. But in return for letting Nvidia kind of dominate the technology you use in a game, they give you some RTX Remix 2 desktop with multiple 5090s where you take all these assets, put it in there, and then they try to make them look better. And because it's done before the game is shipped and rendering in real time, developers can look at what it pops out and go, we reject this one, we reject that one, but you know what, this asset here, this does look better than what our artists made, and we have control over it, so we're okay to put this in the game. Thank you, Nvidia, for giving us this bonus. This could be actually a huge boon for indie devs who can make much worse looking base assets that get the concept across, and then they use RTX Remix 2, some box that Nvidia delivers to them, to generate better looking AAA variants. Why wouldn't you just do that? Well, the answer to both of those questions I just asked is that Nvidia needs to call this DLSS and run it in real time so that you need an Nvidia card to use it, and thus AMD is That's the goal. And I'm going to explain why this is actually common sense, if also devious for Nvidia to do, and how AMD should respond to this massive threat to their ability to compete in desktop and laptop graphics. But first, an ad from a sponsor. Ever feel like Microsoft is playing around with you at the prices they expect you to pay for their software? Well, that's how I feel, or at least how I felt years ago before I started using CDkeyoffer.com. That's right, this piece of content is sponsored by CDkeyoffer.com, a fantastic place to get reasonably priced Microsoft Office and operating system software. They're authentic keys that are delivered very quickly once you purchase them. And you know, when it comes to the Office software, by the way, once you link that to your Microsoft account, it's just there in your downloads. You can get a new desktop, a new laptop, and just log in with your Microsoft account whenever you boot it up for the first time, and then download it, and it's done. And there's no need to constantly rebuy or get subscriptions to, monthly fees for Office software. You can just get it once, link it to your account, and then you just have it. And you get a couple, you can jump between different devices as well. And that is what I've been doing for a very long time, since CDkeyoffer.com started sponsoring Moore's Law is Dead. And so if you want to get some of these products for reasonable prices and show support for Moore's Law is Dead, check them out through the links below. Remember, even just clicking on those links helps the channel a ton, and it helps you save money, of course, if you use offer code BROKENSILICON to save 25% on the software on their website, in addition to the already marked down prices they have. And then, of course, you can also use Die Shrink to save 3% on everything else on the website. Once again, support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out CDkeyoffer.com today. All right, so look, there's no way around it. Nvidia is an AI company now, not a gaming company. And to expect their future generations of graphics cards to not use more and more of the proportional silicon on a die for AI performance instead of pure gaming performance, well, it's naive to think Nvidia won't do that. Remember, an RTX 5090 that's sold for, well, I guess nowadays $3,000 to $4,000, that can be sold for like $10,000 in the professional market. And so Nvidia with the 6090 is going to want to use even more of the silicon for AI stuff and less of it for raster, and probably even less of it even for ray tracing. Additionally, we know that AMD's RDNA 5 flagship is going to be big, like really big, with multiple chiplets and hundreds of compute units that might not only double, or I don't know, who knows, triple their current card, the mid-range 9070 XT performance in raster, but also increase ray tracing performance by, I don't honestly, like 4 to 6x. That might be hard for an AI-focused card to be in either raster or ray tracing next year. Oh, and by the way, to the people that say I'm overhyping AMD, Microsoft has already publicly confirmed these details. So get mad at Microsoft for confirming an order of magnitude increase in ray tracing performance. But anyways, how do you compete with this monster if you're Nvidia and you feel compelled from a business perspective to make like half of the silicon actually for AI, not for raster or ray tracing? Furthermore, what if the rumors actually of the RTX 6090 being delayed to 2028 come true, and not only does AMD take the raster and ray tracing performance crown late next year, but the best Nvidia even has to compete with it isn't even the 6090, but maybe some like 750 watt RTX 5090 Ti. Well, what would Nvidia do? Well, what do? You flip over the table. You don't play the game anymore. And you release something you call DLSS 5 that uses neural rendering and try to force devs to render games in the most inefficient way possible, because your cards, even if it isn't efficient, can do it better than AMD can. And even if AMD wins in pure raster and maybe even pure ray tracing next gen, you can say that's last gen. That's like AMD trying to compete in raster when we brought ray tracing out. Now we have neural rendering and we crushed them in that. And again, this would allow Nvidia to force AMD to basically not get proper AAA graphic support in any dev that partners with Nvidia for neural rendering. I mean, it lets them pretend that AMD's 150 plus compute unit monster next year isn't actually faster, and it begins the creation of I guess I'll call it a neural moat around their graphics cards and around AAA PC gaming that could slowly turn it into a monopoly for Nvidia. Which, by the way, is what Nvidia has always been trying to do for decades now, not even just with PhysX. Go look up what they did with tessellation too. And, ultimately, when it comes to what we do about this, or even what AMD does about this, I'm kind of conflicted. I mean, when it comes to us gamers, I'm not really sure what we can do except, well, make our voices heard. And we already are in a big way. We need to keep doing this. We need to keep making it clear that journalists that are bribed by Nvidia into swallowing this nonsense, that we won't click on their videos nor read their articles for as long as they do this sort of thing. And we need to also make it clear to game developers that they should be worried that if they cover their games in AI Slop, we will be less likely to buy their games and they will make less money. I mean, public pressure towards Nvidia's initiatives has worked multiple times in the past. Remember, just recently, Nvidia was forced to add PhysX support back to the RTX 5000 series, at least in a limited way, because of the backlash towards removing it. And we've also seen in the past the GeForce Partner Program, which if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it. It's one of the most horrifically anti-competitive moves I've ever seen from a company. That went nowhere quickly because outrage towards it spread like wildfire, and Nvidia was forced to back down. And I think this can be done again. And they have a way to save face. They could say, oh, that was an early version, and we tweaked it and changed it, and they'll show off something without AI Slop maybe at the end of this year and just pretend that's what they were going to do the whole time. They can save face and back down if we pressure them, and we should do that. But then when it comes to AMD, what should AMD do? Well, look, I am sure AMD is tempted to do what they have been doing for like the past, I don't know at this point, right? Like 5 years or so, which is copy everything Nvidia does and just have it come out a year late and slightly lower quality. I don't want AMD to do that this time. Now, don't get me wrong. I think AMD should continue to keep up with DLSS, the real DLSS, not that AI Slop version that Nvidia just showed. The real DLSS, like DLSS 4.5, they should try to catch up in quality with that. And maybe they use a little bit of neural rendering to make lighting look better as an option, but maybe they don't touch the textures. They don't obviously touch the geometry. If AMD did that, that's fine. But outside of that, I would suggest that AMD should consider zigging while Nvidia is zagging. Nvidia is putting all of this effort into making DLSS not really something that raises performance anymore, but something that creates ever increasing amounts of fake frames that actually increase your input lag, while requiring multiple 5090s to run the latest tech demo they've showed. That's really actually the opposite of what DLSS promised us, which was more performance for less. They're doing the opposite lately, and I think AMD should do the opposite of what Nvidia is doing here. Yes, have like an ultra quality mode for FSR 5, for example, that tries to compete with the latest DLSS, but doesn't add AI Slop. But then maybe they go the other way with other modes. Like make there be a very real difference. Like balanced and especially performance mode, well, maybe they could say we got performance mode to get pretty close to native. And so instead of just lowering your frame rates and making performance, quality, and balance all look slightly better, we're actually going to take performance mode, not the quality mode, but the performance mode. And we're going to lower image quality slightly from where it could be and maybe double your frame rates. I mean, imagine that selling point. You could have Nvidia over here with AI Slop saying you need a 6090 to use neural rendering in DLSS 5. And over here, you could have AMD saying, hey, we don't have a lot of neural rendering, but it's because we don't think you want it. What do we have? Well, we have more raster, more ray tracing performance, and we do have an ultra quality FSR5 mode that looks really good, but we also have a performance mode that is so efficient at getting you tons of frames that look very close to native. Not frame gen, just real frames. We're so good at spitting out near native quality frames that we get you as many frames as if you had multi-frame gen, but it's actually real frames. That's a selling point that I think AMD should go for. That again would be a zig with Nvidia zagging. Getting you more real frames with more real images, while Nvidia over here is lowering your frame rate, giving you fake frames, and requiring 250-90s to even get to that. That is what I would advise AMD to do. Oh yeah, also AMD, bring FSR4 to RDNA 3. I'm not going to stop saying it until you do that. I will be here in a decade saying you should do that if you haven't done it a decade from now. But otherwise, that is going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember I put out another video this week where I interviewed a developer getting their reaction to DLSS 5. But then also for patrons, I just dropped an over 1 hour conversation where me and Dan talk about the reactions to DLSS 5, compare it to if it's similar to DLSS 1, and therefore if everyone's overreacting, it will be good eventually. There are some key differences between it that we work through, and it's really a bonus broken silicon that you get access to if you join the Patreon for even just the $2 tier, and even at the $1 tier, you'll get it eventually, and access to dozens of die shrinks in the Essentials catalog. Also, by the way, if you join the Patreon, you'll get access to asking guest questions. The next one is Leo at Kit Guru. We'll be talking about Arrow Lake Refresh, and many other guests will be coming on soon. So please consider supporting us on Patreon, and of course, also subscribe to Moore's Law Z on YouTube. Ring the bell button, share, and comment down below. I said a lot. I want to know your opinions of it. But for everybody else, if you made it this far into the video, as I always say, thank you for watching.